She found the second phone hidden in his gym bag, and for a moment she felt the sick thrill of being right, until she saw her own name in the messages, sent from a number she didn't recognize, reporting back her every move for the past year. She wasn't uncovering his secret. She was the last one to find out she had been the subject of his. 8 months earlier, Nora Voss had no reason to doubt anything. The apartment was warm. The coffee was timed to brew at 6:45. And Daniel kissed her on the cheek before leaving each morning with the comfortable reliability of a man who had nowhere to hide. She was a contracts manager at a mid-sized firm. He was a financial analyst with a client list he described as boring but lucrative. Their life together was not extraordinary. It was steady, and steadiness, Nora had long believed, was the thing worth protecting. The first inconsistency was so small, she almost missed it. Daniel had told her his Thursday client dinners ran until 9, sometimes 10. But in late October, she'd walked past his firm's website and noticed the office closed at 5 on Thursdays for internal compliance meetings. She didn't mention it. Instead, she filed it away in the part of her mind she reserved for things that didn't yet have names. It wasn't suspicion. Not exactly. It was the quiet feeling of a room that had been entered while she was sleeping. She saw the woman on a Tuesday. Nora had stopped at the coffee shop on Meridian Street. Not her usual one, just the closest one to a client meeting that had run long. And through the glass, she watched a woman at a corner table glance up at her, then look quickly back down. The movement was too deliberate to be casual. The woman was composed, well-dressed, holding a paperback she clearly wasn't reading. By the time Nora had her order, the woman was gone. She left a cold cup and a crumpled receipt behind. That evening, Nora asked Daniel what time he'd gotten home the previous Wednesday. She kept her voice easy, curious, not accusatory. He said 7. She had been home at 7, and he had not been there until past 9. And she knew, because she had been watching a film she later found paused at the 83rd minute, right where she'd stopped when she heard his key in the lock. He didn't flinch. He smiled and corrected himself. 7:30, maybe 8, and poured himself a glass of water, like the conversation was already over. She told Claire over lunch the following week. Claire Merritt had been Nora's closest friend since university, and she had the useful quality of saying plainly what other people wrapped in the careful language. She listened to all of it. The Thursdays, the coffee shop woman, the corrected timeline. And she put her fork down and said that something was wrong. Not maybe, not possibly, wrong. Nora said she didn't want to accuse him without proof. Claire said that needing proof before trusting her own instincts was itself a form of damage Daniel had probably helped create. 3 days after that conversation, Nora found the gym bag. Daniel had left it by the front door with unusual carelessness. He was meticulous about his things, always had been. She told herself she was moving it out of the way. She unzipped it only because the zipper pull had caught on the strap. That was what she told herself. Inside, there was a change of clothes, his spare deodorant, and a folded receipt from a hotel 11 blocks away, dated 6 weeks prior. 1 room, 2 nights, paid in cash. His name was not on it. No name was. When she showed him the receipt, Daniel did something she hadn't anticipated. He didn't deny. He pivoted. He asked, very quietly, if she had been going through his things. He asked how long she had been doing this. He said the receipt was from a colleague's work event, that he had paid cash for another colleague's room because the man had forgotten his card, and that he was more concerned, honestly, about what it said about her, about them, that her first instinct was to search rather than ask. By morning, she was apologizing for the tone of a question she had every right to ask. What Nora didn't know, what she had no architecture to imagine yet, was that while she and Daniel were having that carefully managed argument, a woman named Sienna Marsh was parked one street over in a gray sedan, watching the lights move through the apartment windows. Sienna had been doing this for 11 months. She knew Nora's morning schedule, her grocery patterns, her lunch friends, and her gym days. She knew which window was the bedroom and which was the office Daniel had told Nora she shouldn't use because of sensitive client files. Nora started keeping a log in late November. A small notebook, nothing digital. She wasn't sure why she made that choice, only that it felt safer. She wrote down times, dates, inconsistencies. She wrote down the name of the coffee shop and the day she'd seen the woman. She noted the receipts she could find and the receipts that should have existed but didn't. It was a modest, methodical act, and it made her feel marginally less like she was losing her mind. She didn't yet know that having a mind worth destabilizing was precisely why Daniel had chosen her. In the second week of December, Nora noticed a charge on the joint account she didn't recognize. $42 to a carrier she'd never heard of, labeled as a device plan. She nearly let it go. $42 was not a dramatic number. But she photographed the statement instead and added it to the notebook. She searched the carrier name and found it was a prepaid service, the kind used for temporary numbers. She sat with that knowledge for a long time. Then she wrote it down, closed the notebook, and went to make dinner like nothing in her had shifted. The client trip to Portland in January was the one that left no trail. No hotel loyalty points, no reimbursement request to his firm, which she verified by calling the billing department with a question about a tax form. A small lie she felt entirely justified in telling. The drive should have taken 6 hours round trip. His car had logged over 800 miles. She knew because she had checked the odometer the night before he left, and again the morning he returned, a habit she had developed with no fanfare and no announcement, quiet as housekeeping. Owen Tate called the apartment landline on a Wednesday morning in January, asking for Daniel by his full name. When Nora said he was at work, Owen Tate asked if she could confirm the wire transfer had processed. $30,000, routed through an account associated with a firm called Fosfield Capital. Nora said she would have Daniel return the call. She wrote the name down, Fosfield Capital. She searched it that afternoon and found an LLC registered 11 months ago in her name, at her address, using her social security number. She had never heard of it before that phone call. She did not confront Daniel. Not yet. The instinct that rose in her was not anger, but a cold, clarifying stillness. The feeling of understanding suddenly that the game had different rules than she'd been told. She photographed everything she found in the office that afternoon. The filing cabinet had been left unlocked. Later, she would understand that was intentional, a breadcrumb laid on a trail designed to lead her somewhere manageable. But that afternoon, she photographed the folders, the account statements, the correspondence with a letterhead she didn't recognize. and she sent the images to an email address Daniel did not know existed. The folder was labeled with her full name and social security number in Daniel's handwriting. Inside were copies of documents she had signed, or believed she had signed, over the past 2 years. Loan applications, account authorizations, a power of attorney she had no memory of executing. Some bore her signature in ink she recognized as her own. Others were close enough that only someone who had studied her handwriting very carefully would have known the difference. She stood in that office for a long time, not moving, while somewhere in her, the architecture of the last 4 years began its slow, irreversible rearrangement. Every evening at 9, Sienna Marsh sent Daniel a summary. It was methodical and impersonal. The kind of report written by someone who had learned to detach observation from conscience. That evening's read. Subject spent 40 minutes in the office. Photographed documents. Did not appear distressed. Resumed normal activity by 7. Sienna had been composing these reports for over a year. She was good at her job. What she was not good at, and what she was only now beginning to notice in herself, was ignoring the growing discomfort of watching a woman systematically discover that her life had been hollowed out. The night Daniel almost unraveled his own cover was in early February. He came home later than expected, distracted in a way he couldn't fully mask, and said something to Nora about the Portland account as though she knew what he was referencing. Then stopped, corrected himself, changed the sentence entirely. Nora gave no sign that she had registered the slip. She asked about his dinner instead. Later, writing in her notebook by lamplight while Daniel slept, she recorded the phrase he'd started to say, word for word, and drew a careful line connecting it to a notation she'd made 3 weeks prior. The picture was assembling itself. Claire came back in February, angrier this time. Nora had shared everything, carefully, systematically. Over 2 hours and a bottle of wine Claire had brought as cover for the visit. Claire didn't panic. She sat very still and said Nora needed a forensic accountant, and she needed one before Daniel had any reason to move anything. She said she knew someone, a woman named Marcus. No, the accountant was a man named Marcus Webb, who had done consulting work for Claire's firm, and that he was discreet, fast, and had worked fraud cases before. Nora said she would call him the next morning. She called him that night. Marcus Webb had the calm energy of someone who had seen too much financial ugliness to be surprised by any specific variety of it. He met Nora at a coffee shop on the east side, not her neighborhood, not Daniel's, and he listened without interrupting while she laid out everything she had. The photographs, the LLC, the wire transfer, the documents. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said the structure she was describing was not amateur. It was experienced. It had probably taken 18 months to build, and it was designed to survive Nora's departure, not require it. He said that with care, it could be taken apart the same way it was built, quietly, from the inside. It was Marcus who introduced Nora to Priya Anand, a private investigator who had spent a decade working financial crimes cases and had the specific skill set required to document what Marcus was finding without tipping off the subject. Priya was small and precise, and listened to Nora with the focused attention of someone assembling something complex. She didn't offer sympathy. She offered a plan. She said that Nora's most important asset right now was Daniel's belief that she was still oblivious, still manageable, and that every day Nora maintained that performance was another day they had to build the case. Over 3 weeks in February, Marcus Webb constructed a parallel timeline of Vosfield Capital's movement. What looked like modest investment activity from the outside was, underneath, a rotating shell. Money in, money redistributed, signatures forged or coerced. Investors like Owen Tate fed false returns, while the actual funds migrated toward accounts Daniel controlled under a separate identity. Nora's name was on the public face of every transaction. In the event of an investigation, she would have appeared to be the architect. Daniel had not just stolen from her. He had built a machine designed to make her the one who went to prison. Daniel began, in March, to introduce small doubts. He mentioned that Nora seemed stressed. Was she sleeping enough? He suggested, gently, that she might benefit from talking to someone. That he had noticed she seemed scattered lately, forgetful. He referenced a conversation they had apparently had about a dinner reservation she had no memory of making. And when she said she didn't recall it, he looked at her with something that was almost concern. It was a finely calibrated performance, gaslighting with the texture of care. She recognized it now. She had read enough of the documents in that folder to understand what kind of man arranged these things in advance. Priya had found the second set of books by the first week of March. A secondary accounting structure, maintained in a cloud storage account, linked to an email address that used a slight misspelling of Nora's name. Everything Daniel needed to demonstrate, in the event of an audit, that the real decision-maker had been Nora Voss, operating independently through Vosfield Capital, with Daniel serving only as an occasional informal advisor. The cruelty of it was architectural. He had not just used her identity. He had constructed a version of her, a fictional Nora who was guilty of everything and had been building her quietly for nearly 2 years. Sienna missed a check-in on a Thursday in mid-March. Daniel noticed immediately. He sent a message, then another. When she finally responded, the text was brief. She said she'd had a situation that she would explain later. She did not explain later. What Daniel did not know, and what Sienna had not yet fully admitted to herself, was that she had spent 40 minutes that Thursday watching Nora Voss sit in a park with her friend Claire, laughing at something on a phone, completely unaware she was being observed. And that something about the image had made Sienna feel ill, in a way she could not name or suppress. Claire stayed the night in late March, not because there was an emergency, but because Nora had called her at 10 in the evening, sounding carefully, precisely calm, which Claire knew was the version of Nora that was closest to breaking. She brought overnight things and took the couch without discussion. Daniel was traveling. They stayed up until 2 in the morning, going over everything Priya had sent. And Claire said quietly that she was scared for Nora, and Nora said she was too. But that scared was not the same as stopped. In the morning, Claire made coffee, and they did not speak about fear again. 1 month before it ended, Sienna Marsh sent Daniel a message from a number she had never used before. It said only, "I need to know what happens to her when this is done." Daniel's response took 4 hours to arrive and said, "She walks away clean. Nora walks away clean." Sienna read it 3 times. She had been in this arrangement long enough to know what a managed answer looked like. She had written enough of them herself. She screenshotted the exchange, saved it to a folder she had labeled with a date, and began, for the first time, to think about what she would say if someone asked her to. Daniel booked the flight in the first week of April, a one-way to Lisbon with a layover in Madrid, purchased under a second name Priya had not yet found. He had been preparing this exit for 6 months. The liquidation sequence was already drafted, a cascade of account transfers designed to execute over 72 hours, moving the money through 4 jurisdictions before it came to rest in a structure that bore no connection to anyone named Daniel Hale. He told Nora he had a conference in Chicago. He showed her the itinerary. It was, like all of his documentation, very convincing. Owen Tate had been patient for 2 years, but patience has an anatomy, and his was beginning to collapse. He had invested through Vossfield Capital on the recommendation of a man he considered a friend, a man who had eaten at his table and attended his daughter's graduation, and the returns had been plausible enough to keep him quiet. But in April, he had asked for a partial withdrawal and been given 4 different explanations across 3 weeks. And a man who had managed money long enough to lose some of it recognized the texture of a stall. He called his lawyer. His lawyer told him to call the SEC. Marcus Webb sent Nora the final report on a Sunday evening. It was 43 pages. The total exposure traced back to Nora's identity was close to $2 million across 11 accounts. The forged documentation was thorough, but not flawless. 3 signatures had inconsistencies a forensic analyst could identify. And the shell structure, while sophisticated, had a flaw at the 3rd transfer layer that Marcus described as a gift. He had already been in contact with the Financial Crimes Unit contact at Priya's recommendation. The report was ready to be handed to federal investigators. They needed one more thing: someone inside the structure willing to confirm the design. Sienna made the call on a Monday. She had spent a week composing it in her head. The logic of it, the terms, the version of herself she would need to present to make it credible. She called the number Priya had left in a message routed through a channel Sienna had not yet fully understood Priya was using. When Priya answered, Sienna said she had documentation, she had communications, and she had 13 months of daily surveillance logs. She said she wanted to speak to someone about cooperation. Priya said she would make the call. She told Sienna not to contact Daniel until she heard back. Sienna said she already hadn't spoken to him in 4 days. The accounts froze at midnight on a Wednesday. It happened quietly, from the outside. A regulatory hold requested through channels that had taken Priya and Marcus 3 weeks to navigate. Daniel would not know until he attempted to initiate the transfer sequence. He was scheduled to do that Friday morning, 2 days before his flight. The hold would look to him like a processing delay for approximately 6 hours. After that, depending on how quickly he moved, the window would close. Marcus had calculated the timing with care. Priya had reviewed it twice. Nora had read it once, said it was good, and gone to bed. Daniel discovered the hold Friday at 9 in the morning. He sat at his laptop in the kitchen, Nora in the next room working from home, and he was quiet for a long time. She heard him make a call, his voice low and controlled. She heard the words, processing issue, and temporary, and I'll have it sorted. She did not go into the kitchen. She made herself more coffee and continued typing. She had spent 4 months learning to perform normalcy under pressure, and she was, by now, very good at it. She did not look at her phone until she heard his footsteps move to the bedroom. The morning of April 19th, Nora woke at 5:30. Daniel was still asleep. She dressed quietly, retrieved her notebook from the hollowed-out reference book on the third shelf, a hiding place she had selected because Daniel had told her once that he never read. And she sat at the kitchen table with her coffee and went through the timeline one final time, not because she needed to, because she had learned these past months that clarity was something you maintained actively, deliberately, the way you maintained anything worth keeping. She closed the notebook. She looked at the gym bag by the front door, which Daniel had brought out the night before. She found the second phone in the gym bag on a Thursday morning. She had not planned to look, or she had planned it so thoroughly that the act no longer felt like a plan. The phone was tucked beneath his spare shirt, powered down, and she would have missed it if the shape under the fabric hadn't caught her eye in exactly the way she had trained herself to notice over months of looking. She powered it on. The passcode she tried was the birthday of his mother, which he had once told her in the context of a story about a woman he loved without reservation. It opened. The messages on the phone numbered in the hundreds, but it wasn't Sienna's messages to Daniel that stopped her. It was the thread she found labeled with her own initials, NV, running back 14 months, message after message sent to Daniel's second number from an unknown contact. The entries were brief, precise, time-stamped. Subject left for gym at 7:04. Subject had lunch with C. Merritt. Duration 90 minutes. Subject appeared to examine mail carefully before entering apartment. Subject in good spirits. She scrolled on until her thumb stopped moving. The sick thrill of having been right collapsed immediately into something far colder. She had not been investigating Daniel. She had been catalogued. In the days that followed, Nora would replay every moment she had believed herself to be the one watching. Every note in her notebook, every photographed document, every careful question asked in the wrong key. She had felt, all those months, like a woman assembling a case. What the phone revealed was that she had been a subject in someone else's file the entire time. Her routines, her friendships, her small acts of private suspicion, all recorded and delivered back to the man sleeping in her bed. Daniel had not feared being discovered. He had monitored the discovery in real time and adjusted accordingly. Every moment she believed she was closing in, he already knew exactly where she was. She did not call Daniel. She did not call anyone for 47 minutes. She sat with the phone in her hand and let the full structure of it assemble itself around her without flinching away from any part of it. The Portland receipts, the Vossfield Capital folder, the forged signatures, the LLC in her name, the drift charges, the gaslighting dressed as concern, the message he had almost said and stopped. All of it had been managed. All of it had been, in some sense, permitted. Permitted by his confidence that she would never find the right thing at the right moment in the right order. She was glad he had underestimated the order. She called Priya first, then Marcus. She did not change her voice or her expression because she was still in the kitchen, and Daniel was still in the shower, and sound traveled in their apartment the way it always had. She said 3 words to Priya. I found it. Priya said she knew. She had received a flag from the monitoring software the moment the phone was powered on, and that everything was in motion. She told Nora to put the phone back exactly where she had found it. Nora said she had already taken photographs. Priya said good. Then she said, stay normal one more day. Nora said she would manage. Marcus Webb moved into position at 7 that morning, sitting in a parked car outside the federal building with a 43-page report, a thumb drive, and a signed statement from Sienna Marsh that had been notarized 2 days prior. Priya was already inside. She had been coordinating with the Financial Crimes Unit for 3 weeks, and the arrest warrant had been signed the previous afternoon. Time to execute at the airport rather than the apartment. Cleaner, more controlled, less room for evidence disposal. Owen Tate had given a corroborating statement by video the previous Wednesday. The architecture Daniel had spent 2 years building was about to be introduced to its own load-bearing failure. Sienna sat in a government office on a Tuesday and told a federal investigator everything she knew in a voice that was steady and completely without ornament. She described the surveillance operation. She produced the daily logs. She explained the secondary accounting structure and the identity construction and the exit plan she had helped Daniel design and had later begun to find unlivable. She said she had understood what she was participating in and had chosen to participate anyway. And she did not offer excuses for that. She offered documentation, 41 exhibits, cross-referenced and dated. The investigator said it was the most organized cooperation package she had seen in 11 years. Sienna said she'd had time to prepare. The accounts had been frozen since Wednesday, and Daniel had spent 2 days attempting to explain a processing error that did not exist. By Friday morning, his flight was in 11 hours, and the transfer had not moved. And he was beginning to understand that something had shifted in the geometry of his situation. He drove to the airport early, 3 hours before his departure, and sat in the short-term lot running through contingencies. He had a second passport. He had cash in the bag he had not checked. He had a hotel reservation in Madrid under the second name. He was still constructing the revised plan when he picked up the bag and walked toward departures. Owen Tate gave his statement on a Wednesday afternoon in a conference room at his lawyer's office. He was precise and thorough, and not angry in the explosive way. Angry in the particular way of a man who had genuinely trusted someone and was processing the specific taxonomy of that betrayal. He described the dinners, the recommendation, the returns that had seemed modest enough to be real. He described the 4 explanations for the withdrawal delay, the name Voss Field Capital, and the woman whose name appeared on all the paperwork, Nora Voss, whom he had never met, whose life he now understood had been used the same way his money had. He signed his statement without revision. They took Daniel at gate 14. Nora was in the terminal, which she had not told Marcus or Priya she planned to do, standing far enough back to be unobserved, close enough to see his face when the 2 federal agents approached from either side. He stopped walking. He looked at the agents with an expression she recognized. The same expression he had worn in their kitchen when she'd shown him the hotel receipt, the one that organized itself into something manageable while processing what could not be managed. She watched him look around the terminal in a way she understood was not confusion, but assessment. Then he put the bag down and stood still. She did not feel triumph. She felt the specific relief of weight removed. Sienna Marsh sat in the interview room for 2 hours the day after Daniel's arrest. She answered every question put to her, and several that weren't. She described the full chronology of her involvement, the recruitment, the daily logistics, the moment she had begun to feel the wrongness of it as something physical. She said she did not expect mitigation to change the shape of what she had done. The investigator said they appreciated her cooperation and that the state's evidence agreement would be honored pending final review. Sienna nodded. When the interview ended, she sat alone for a few minutes before standing. She did not know what came after this. She thought that might be exactly right. Nora spent most of a Tuesday at the bank. The branch manager had been briefed by Priya's contact and brought in the compliance officer. And together, they worked through every account, every authorization, every line Nora's name had been attached to without her knowledge. She signed new documents, replacing the old ones. She flagged the forgeries for the forensic file. She closed 3 accounts she had not opened and opened 2 new ones she would control alone. The compliance officer asked if she was doing all right. Nora said she was doing precisely what needed to be done, which was its own kind of answer. Claire arrived at the police station with 2 coffees at 9 in the morning and did not ask Nora how she was feeling. She sat down beside her and handed her the cup and said that she had brought a clean shirt in her bag in case Nora needed it, and that she had cleared her calendar for the rest of the week. Nora took the coffee and looked at her and said she was sorry Claire had been in this with her. Claire said she had been in this because she had wanted to be, and that wanting to be in something difficult with someone was what friendship actually was, and that Nora could stop apologizing for things she hadn't done. Marcus Webb sent the final report to 3 separate addresses on a Friday afternoon. The federal investigators, Nora's attorney, and 1 copy to Nora herself. He included a note that was brief and professional, saying the forensic work was complete, the document trail was fully annotated and cross-referenced, and that the case was in good hands. He also said, and this was the only personal sentence in an otherwise technical document, that Nora had handled the operational complexity of the past 4 months with more discipline than most professionals he had worked alongside. Nora read that line twice. Then she printed the report, hole-punched it, and put it in a binder. Priya Anand closed the file on a Thursday. She entered the final notes into the case record, logged the hours, archived the surveillance documentation, and sat for a moment with the folder in her hands. She had worked cases that were larger, and cases that were more dangerous, and cases that had not resolved as cleanly. This one had resolved because one woman had trusted her instincts before the people in her life confirmed they were right, had documented carefully, had not panicked, had made herself useful to her own rescue. Priya had seen that quality in people twice in 11 years. She filed the folder. She sent Nora a single line. It's closed. You did well. The apartment had already been half emptied. Daniel's things removed by order, her things only, when Nora walked through it alone one last time. She had lived there for 3 years. The kitchen still had the cabinet she had convinced the landlord to let her repaint, a pale green she had chosen over a Sunday morning argument about whether pale green was actually grey. The office was empty now, the filing cabinet gone, the desk gone. The bedroom had only the furniture they'd bought separately before they met. She walked through each room at the same pace, not photographing, not cataloging, just looking at what had been hers and wasn't anymore, and what had been hers all along. She kept the notebook, the green kitchen cabinet she would try to negotiate into the next lease, the reference book with the hollowed out center she left on the shelf because it had served its purpose and she did not want to carry it. She kept the letter from Marcus. She kept the file from Priya. She kept the memory of standing at gate 14 and watching a man put down a bag and understand that the version of events in which he controlled everything had ended. She did not burn anything. She had thought she might want to. Instead, she packed what mattered into a car that was fully and only hers and drove toward whatever came after knowing exactly what she was worth.